Good morning, everybody. My name is Maxime, and this is the CBBC's China's Digital Consumer Webinar Series 2020. Today, I am joined by Ryan Malloy, the CEO at Redfern Digital, and he's coming to us live from Shanghai. Very quickly, I just want to make sure that everybody can see and hear me. So if everybody could find the little hand button here on their webinar panel and click it, that will let me know that you can see and hear me. I see some hands going up. Okay, great. And I've also circled here our questions box. So Ryan is going to give us a presentation first, and then we will have a question session at the end. So if you have any burning questions, please do just type them in, and we will come back to those at the end of the presentation and try to answer them for you. Also, very quickly, an introduction to CBBC. For those of you who don't know, the CBBC is the China-Britain Business Council. We are the leading organisation supporting UK-China trade. Here in the UK, we have offices across the country and across industry sectors. I'm on the consumer team, and here in the consumer team, we support the agriculture, food and drink, and retail sectors. Over in China, we have 13 offices across the country. These are all in the first-tier cities, that's Shanghai, Beijing, Guangzhou, and Shenzhen, as well as some second and third-tier cities as well. Upcoming webinars, as I mention every time, this is our series, so we have lots of webinars in store for you. You can find all previous webinars on our YouTube channel if you want to relive them again. There's hours and hours of entertainment there. But for upcoming this month, we actually have one tomorrow, which is not on the screen, so please join us tomorrow morning at 9:30. This is a webinar with two speakers. We'll have Kevin Rogers from Elanders and Johan Eldal from Aventura, so double trouble tomorrow. But upcoming in May, we will be hearing from Connect Plus on the 5th, Crayfish on the 19th, and into June, we will also be hearing from ChemLinked, and that's a food and drink sector-focused webinar. Also here at the CBBC, we're offering free 30-minute consultations with the CMBA. If you want to find out more about that service, you can do so on the website. You just go to cbc.org, events, other events, and China Business Clinics. But today I would like to introduce you to our speaker. This is Ryan. He's lived in China for over 17 years, and he's worked in the China marketing industry for nearly 10 of them. He's the CEO of Redfern Digital, and he's worked with some of the biggest brands coming into the market, covering branding, strategy, social media, marketing, and more. And today we are talking about moving brands online in the China market, digital and e-commerce, and this is, I believe, related to the coronavirus outbreak and how brands should be adapting. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Ryan.
Brilliant. Hello, everyone, and thanks very much, Maxime. I'm just going to show my screen right now. Just to give you guys a bit of background, today we've been talking about how to help brands go online in the China market. Especially given recent circumstances with COVID-19, we've seen more and more brands move online and be pushed to move their total retail kind of spend, both from marketing and what they get out of in sales to online. It's been something that we saw being an eventual term of how brands would enter into China, and something we've actually always suggested for brands to do, but it's meant that with COVID-19 this definitely sped up. So that's kind of what I'll touch on today, and really look at how brands can better budget for paid media, owned media, and then also e-commerce as a result of that. So Redfern Digital, just a bit of background, as Maxime mentioned, we're based in Shanghai. We work mostly with brands coming to market. We also work with some Chinese companies as well on going out of China. We're China focused. We're a full service agency. We help brands with everything from production, strategy, social media, e-commerce, IP monitoring, creative solutions, branding, and kind of the market entry elements as well. So in general, what I'll touch on first, kind of some of the major changes we've seen over the last 2 months. Then I'll touch on later kind of the situation for brands, how that's changed, and then some different approaches to market that are really important, as well as just some simple things that brands can do to increase their success in the market. So the main thing really is when we look at how COVID-19 has affected things is it's moved very much shopping behavior to online. Now, we already saw that have seen that in China, a large proportion of retail, I mean, some categories, if you look at, for example, what Dyson have been doing, or Brita, these categories are already around maybe 60, 70, 80% online in terms of their nationwide sales for younger people. But what we've seen is actually for older demographics, they have started to shop online more and more. Now, what's interesting about that is that this is something that we are continuing to see. So these are not just things that have changed during the last 2 months in China, but as people's behaviors have changed, we're seeing that they're continuing to shop online, and as a result of that, it's taking more and more of retail. With certain categories, obviously we've seen sport and fitness have quite a bit of an increase in medicine and healthcare. Other categories that we also saw throughout more the main 3 weeks in China where we had serious lockdown was food and beverage, especially fresh and frozen food and beverage categories. We saw a spike of around 3 to 4 times in terms of their online sales on JD. So definitely some categories have fared better than others, but it's also really how brands have reacted to this. For example, we've noticed with a lot of the brands that we work with over the last 2 or 3 weeks, no matter the category, we're doing so much live streaming. It's become pretty much the hottest thing in China, with Douyin now opening up their own Luban store, and with more and more of social media platforms turning to live streaming, and with people having kind of limitations on movement, and in terms of the buying behavior, it's having a huge impact. Live streaming is great. The main things that we've seen is that particular types of KOLs, usually the top 25% in terms of size, do the best, and therefore we encourage brands to work with them. Again, live streaming is great, but it's very much based on percentages as well. So you have to offer quite a decent discount to the live streamer in order for them to work with you. Douyin has really taken the most out of kind of the most recent opportunities. They've set up a Luban store, which is essentially a store within their own platform that allows for people to click through and purchase. Leading up to 2020, Douyin last year had the lowest cost per engagement, and we found that when working with different KOLs and with their own promotional tools, that we had the best conversion. Platforms are quite different in China, especially with out-of-apps or out-of-Tmall platforms. They can be quite different. Some are more focused for awareness. Douyin is definitely one where you're trying to get kind of a quick brand introduction that then leads through to a purchase. Realizing they had this traffic, they set up a Luban store. Now, this is something that's very easy for brands to set up quite quickly, and we've seen brands within a matter of weeks during the virus lockdown period sign up to have basically means that the traffic can be much easily converted to a sale. And so when we're looking at e-commerce, we're saying, why is it important? Well, we've always seen that, I guess what I'm going through today is what we've been saying for the last 5 years. It's just that now it's become more prominent. So most premium foreign products are purchased online. It's the best starting place for a product to sell nationwide, for a product to do cheapest marketing in terms of cost per engagement, in terms of conversion cost for product purchase. When you're trying to introduce a brand, you really want to take the best opportunity to show as much as you can about what you stand for. And e-commerce landing pages really are kind of the epitome of that. They, in China, allow for brands to give as much information about their unique selling points, about what they stand for, why their products are better than other brands, and kind of the value that they can give, which is it's often offline quite hard to do, right? So if Chinese consumers are to see your product in City Super or Olay or Lianhua or any of the kind of the convenience stores, if they haven't seen it before in some form of marketing, the choice really is to go with what they trust and what they know. So e-commerce provides an opportunity to really kind of represent your brand. And brands can more easily target their niche audience. So some of the things that you can do, for example, if you're like a premium mother and baby brand, this is something we do quite a lot of, and you know that really only a percentage of mothers that are based in tier 1 cities in China that have a high income bracket are going to buy your product. You can target what they have previously bought, right? So you can look at certain products that have been bought by particular mothers, and you can target them with different banner ads. It's the same with Douyin as well. They have mechanisms that you can retarget particular income brackets. So that's another thing as well. If it's not a very mass market product and you only know that a particular amount will buy it, this can be very useful. It provides nationwide capabilities, and also it acts as brand validation for offline shoppers. A lot of Chinese consumers, when they walk through City Super, Olay, Lianhua, they'll look at different products and then often will go online to see if this product can be bought at a cheaper rate. And even after purchasing the first time, will potentially buy it more frequently or in bulk online. So this is something that's very important if your brand doesn't have that Tmall store, JD store, or social media. It doesn't have the validation it often needs. So when we're looking at the brand situation, when first coming into China, this is usually what we see, right? So brands, they would find a distributor, usually quite a large distributor, and upon finding this distributor, then kind of, I guess, feel the job's kind of half done. Now, there's a problem with this model. Distributors are essentially trading companies that over the last 20 years have done a very good job, some more than others, of getting product onto shelf across China. Some are more focused on the eastern region, or the northern region, the southern region, but essentially they do not have e-retail capabilities, or if they say that they do, they're not that good. It's just not their DNA. So when we look at how a brand signs a distribution agreement, often a lot of the focus is on offline retail. And the question is, if the product doesn't have enough rotation rates in the first 2 or 3 years and people don't know this brand well enough, it will essentially have to move out of the market and the distribution agreement will fall to pieces. What brands need to start doing is looking at how they can put their budget onto 2 different elements. So this is what brands should be doing. So here we have an e-commerce distributor, and then we have your normal distribution company. Now, it does create some channel conflict, but the main thing is, and what I'm really trying to show here is, a lot of the volume in the first 3 years should be coming through e-retail channels in the China market. So therefore, a lot of the marketing expense should be as well. And you'll see a kind of a trickle along effect as your Tmall stores do better, and Tmall store sales do better and better, your JD store sales, and the more and more platforms you move on to, you'll start to see offline do better. And you'll also put yourself in a much better bargaining position when you're working with offline retailers. And that's kind of like the 2 different ways that you could look at market. So we have brands that are in market and out of market. When we look at China, there's obviously the cross-border model being out of market, right? So the way that we would generally suggest to look at China would be, first, look at a cross-border store. That would potentially be Tmall or JD store, Tmall Global or JD Global, and then look at a private traffic store. That could be something such as a mini program that can also help with cross-border. It can sell out of the same warehouse, so it can reduce costs in terms of logistics. And then finally, Daigou, which are parallel importers. That's kind of what we see as being very important. And the main thing there as well, I think a lot of brands, when they see Tmall Global or JD worldwide, they're quite worried about the actual costs around it. What's important to understand is when you're working with either of these platforms, they do have some costs, but they're relatively the same. Maybe a little bit higher with Tmall, but the major cost that you will have is the in-app marketing costs, the banner ads, the live streaming. And you'll actually find that per cost per engagement or cost per sale, it's probably lower on Tmall, just due to the fact that they have higher traffic for the majority of categories. So that's one thing as well that I often say to brands. I'm like, if we, depending on the budget that you have, it's really something that you should look to operate and start with, and then you can branch out onto other platforms at later stages. In terms of in-market, so we have a private traffic store, so you can first set up a mini program. You can work with WeChat KOLs within that ecosystem to grow that. You can then look for the online retailer mode, so start to work with different retailers that have their own Tmall stores. So essentially, they might be, I don't know, if you're looking at vitamins like Chemist Warehouse, or if you're looking at, different types of retailers that would already sell their product in the UK that you could work with and kind of build them out. Then next would be vertically integrated platforms. So if you're in mother and baby, that would be things like Kids Want or Baby Max, or if you're in alcohol, it might be Buy My Wine. So there are different platforms that generally act as hypermarkets. So this is a very low risk approach for a product that's kind of in market. And then finally, you'd look to establish your flagships, your Tmall flagship first. your JD Flagship, and then finally offline retail. So as you can see from the suggested models that we would provide to our clients, really offline retail is that later stage where you've started to do very well on your stores, and you can then start to push out across different provinces and work with doing in-store activation. So, and again, this is kind of the which one is right for me, right? So depending on if you're in market, so you have an entity set up, or you're working with a distributor, or you're out of market, then it's slightly different, right? So in terms of if you're an SME, some of the things that you could do in the beginning would be to look at, for example, setting up a WeChat mini app store. Mini app stores, if 2 years ago someone had asked me, is it a good idea to sell through one, I would say no, because it's quite expensive. To set one up is not. So it very much lures brands into the idea of, for less than £5,000, I can have my mini program set up and running. I can sell through it. But the problem is that it's private traffic. So no one's going to see it unless you use a lot of WeChat KOL spend. And when you're looking at that, you might be expecting, say, anything from 1 to 2. So every 1 RMB you spend, you get 2 RMB back. Or you might even go up to something like 1 to 5, but generally it sits around a more 1 to 1, 1 to 2 if you're using good KOLs. So you have to put in some investment, and it wouldn't be a profitable solution to just focus on that, especially year one. Vertically integrated platforms, again, the Luban store and Douyin is something that if you're in market and have an entity, you can set up, and then a paid media launch. So when I talk about media, there's 2 parts, right? And one thing that I feel brands are often quite ill-advised on is own media. Own media being your WeChat account, your Weibo account, your Little Red Book account. So setting these up is good. It's part of validation. It's important for a brand. But if a brand came to me with a certain amount of budget and they said, you know, I want to build sales in the first year, I would say don't set these accounts up. The reason why is because they are very long term. They're 3, 4, 5 years of building a community and putting quite a lot of investment that really is not conversion focused. Paid media is quite different. Paid media very much looks at, okay, I have 100,000 RMB. You go to an agency, and the agency then takes a commission on this, say 10%, and they would then work with you to find suitable KOLs or display ads would then allow to convert to your store, whether that be your mini app or whether that be your Tmall or JD store. And that really can be the best. And own media, I would often say, wait till second year when you've got a market, it's growing quite well. That's really the best opportunity then to put that investment there. And for bigger brands, I think own media is just a must. It's something that's often brought as part of the scope of work for market, and building that community is kind of, I guess, shows the size of that brand. Conversion may be easier in the beginning, so that's often what they'll do. Paid media launch also important, and then a domestic Tmall and JD store, as well as the vertically integrated platforms. So with market entry, it's more or less the same. But one thing that the brands really have to look at with cross-border is Daigou opportunity. Now, so we work with a lot of brands from Australia traditionally, and the parallel import market from Australia is huge. It's actually getting to a point now where it's consolidating. But if you look at, for example, this brand here, this is A2 Milk. They're a very good success story in the China market. They've essentially built themselves to be a $1 billion company. And if we look at, this is from the annual report, the amount of sales that they had actually coming through the parallel import channel in the beginning was huge. So brands really need to work with Chinese consumers, Chinese residents based in the UK, with tourism boards to really push out who their brand is. Now, I'm not saying that it's necessarily for all categories going to be the #1 sales channel as it has been for A2, for example, but it is a great marketing opportunity that brands shouldn't miss out on. And as you can see here, even now, last year, still 61% of the sales coming into the market for A2 Milk was through the Daigou, the parallel import channel. So that's something that's very important, especially from a marketing angle. A lot of Chinese consumers will look at the UK and they will see what are the most popular brands, what brands are doing well, and you can work with, even if you're an SME, you can work with the Daigou in order to tell the story from the UK to China. So when we're looking at social media and grassroots e-commerce, there's some different platforms, right? So we've got And they all have a different purpose. So that's one thing that I want to point out today is, yes, it's important to be on as many platforms as possible, but the way that you work with these platforms is the most important. Some of them, it might be just simply seeding. Some of them, it might be more about in-app marketing. Some of them, it might be just having a shop presence. Some of them, it might be looking at a hypermarket mode. So for example, if we look at Little Red Book. So Little Red Book has a user base of around 90% females. Really, you're going to be using this product more for seeding. It has algorithms. So essentially using large-scale KOLs on Little Red Book isn't very effective because it's more based on your interests. So if you have certain interests, maybe for example, it could be music, then no matter the amount of views that certain posts get, you will be directed towards posts that are most relevant to you. So the best thing that you can really do with Little Red Book is seeding, and that is essentially giving out product to what we call KOCs, so small KOLs that will then post about your product for free, and you can start to build notes so that when someone searches around your category or brand, they will see your products. That's really the kind of the main thing. And you have to make the decision of, are you going to make this into conversion? Little Red Book can only convert to its own store. And even then it's quite difficult. It doesn't convert to any other platform. You cannot put the links there. So with Little Red Book, you can make notes, or you can make some kind of suggestions of platforms, such as that it's been sold on JD. But if not, you have to make a decision of whether you want to set up a store with them, and it really has to be, is it the right category fit? With Douyin, it's definitely been the success story of the last 2 years. As I mentioned before, it's best for conversion. It is able to connect to Tmall, to JD, to multiple platforms. It has its own store. And that's really, in terms of spend, we're starting to put 50, 60, 70% of budgets into Douyin. It also has great targeting tools. Now, would I run own media on Little Red Book and Douyin? Definitely not. Unless you have a product that is very much focused around needing to have video content, not all brands need that, then you can just work with KOLs and paid media. Trying to build your own account on Douyin is often quite difficult. And one thing we've noticed as well, if you look at Little Red Book, for example, they were closed down last year. Just as platforms grow, they can also start to drop. So last year, I think it was between around July till the end of the year, we saw month on month around 5 to 10% decline in users on Little Red Book. It started to go up again, and it's doing okay, but they broke some rules and were taken off the App Store. And it just shows you that, platforms are not forever, and that's something that brands need to take into account. When looking at mini programs, we have Yodzan on the bottom left. So that's something that is its own store inside WeChat. It's very good for setting up mini programs. They have lots of templates that you can use, and we often recommend this to brands because it's an app in itself, so it has some natural traffic, unlike if you set up your own mini program. Tmall Global, in terms of reach, it has the in-app tools. To be completely honest with marketing, if you're trying to look purely at conversion, a lot of the in-app tools that you can find on Tmall and JD, they are technically the best for conversion, better than out of app. Again, it depends on the brand, it depends on the story, but that's something where budget should really be placed towards. And then Kaola is another overseas cross-border platform that a lot of brands are using. It's actually done very well in the last 2 years, and it's competing with Tmall Global to be #1. So before considering e-commerce, the other thing as well, we've seen more and more brands that are being rejected from e-commerce and from distributors due to issues with category or issues with product, or are accepted and then after a year or two figure out, okay, my product doesn't really work. And it's a big cost exercise to go through for a brand. So that doesn't mean that you need to go find a large consumer agency that you have to put lots of money into finding out whether it works or not. It's really about, sure, working with an agency to see if there's fit, but yourself, you can do certain things in terms of your homework, right? So how will my product, for example, fit into the life of a Chinese consumer? If we take certain products such as, I don't know, muesli, for example, or if we take certain types of bread-related products, or things that we would have maybe for breakfast that wouldn't be naturally eaten, Chinese consumers wouldn't naturally consume for breakfast themselves, how is that going to fit into the daily life? And really looking at, for example, do I need to make different recipes, or how am I going to suggest at the certain points of when the consumption will take place? Is it a snack? Is it something in terms of I have to do cross-branding with a certain type of beverage to make that fit? So that's really the most important thing of trying to understand from the consumer perspective. Also then going online and looking at whether your product's been sold by Daigou. So if you go on Taobao, for example, I mean, if you look at the Body Shop, for example, long before they'd even look to sell cross-border, there were lots of Daigou selling their products, right? All brands will notice that if they go on Taobao and do a search of their brand or go on WeChat, even with small brands, you'd be surprised to see the amount of products that have been sold. And if they're being sold, you can still look at competitors that are similar to you in terms of how Daigou are selling them, because these guys are really the experts, right? So they're taking products from the UK that they know will sell well, they're putting them online, and they're selling them in the way that they think is best for the market. And there's a lot that you can learn from that. And it also gives you a good understanding of what reputation does your brand currently have in the China market. If it's got some, then it's obviously a head start, and it's a good kind of green light for you to proceed, especially with e-commerce. And then also in terms of feedback, so trying to understand comments from the store listings, trying to understand from your competitors, what were some of the issues, whether that be taste, whether that be packaging. We found with certain brands over the years, the smallest things sometimes can be slightly off-putting to Chinese consumers, and it's not a lot of homework to go out and find out what they are. Even running a focus group, a couple of focus groups with some Chinese consumers based in the UK or with an agency over here, it's not difficult to get quality feedback, and it doesn't need to be across 100 cities, because again, it comes back to the question of what is a sample size in the China market. Really, you just have to make sure that the main aspects, such as your unique selling points and your packaging and your tastes, they fit. And in terms of, when your brand is searched on social media, what are you seeing? So just basically a bit of a manual social listening. So really trying to understand also how the categories work. So some categories sell very well online and others don't. If we look at FMCG, such as Coca-Cola and Pepsi, it hangs around 10% or maybe 15% of their total sales are online, which is quite small. But then if we move that up to premium FMCG, we start, and foreign FMCG, we start to see that it's actually increasing more towards 20-30%. And again, by category, it's very much how much budget certain brands put onto the different platforms. But then if we look at, for example, a couple of years ago, looking at like Dyson and Brita, we're seeing numbers such as high as 50 and 80% of total sales being sold online. And a large part of their China strategy was selling products through the online channels. And that kind of really helps. So how do I approach the different e-commerce platforms? So the main thing is you need to understand how you're going to price your products. The first thing here is I always say, yes, China is a premium market, and a lot of brands will come and say, okay, I'm going to double the price that it is in the UK, and that it's going to sell here because China's a premium market. We know that luxury goods sell well. It doesn't work like that. It's also a very kind of discount-friendly market, I would say. So one thing that I would suggest is, yes, sure, look to over a period of a year have a higher price than you would expect, potentially even higher than your competitors. It shows that you have value product, but be ready to discount hard on certain festivals such as 618 and 1111. And again, the landing pages say everything. If you go onto Tmall and you look at your competitors, you can very quickly see what are their main propositions. So what are the top 5 things they are saying that helps to convert their sale? Is it the fact the product's organic? Is it the fact that the product has a certain additive or a certain, should I say, mineral or something in it that helps with mother and baby, such as DHA? Or is it something in terms of it has merchandise that is appealing to the consumers? So look at what are the main propositions that these brands have on the landing pages, and that will really help guide the China strategy and what you need to pull forward from a brand perspective. And the next thing is looking at pack sizes, right? So how can you, especially when we're looking at mini programs, you can do some amazing things. You can work, because of their flexibility, you can work with other brands, you can sell bundles, you can do different types of pack sizes, you can do ongoing sales. So for example, if you're working in pet food, you could have it set up so there's a monthly delivery of this product, or a weekly delivery. So there's huge amount of things that are very flexible with mini programs, despite the high cost of private traffic. With Tmall and JD, also again, you can look from very quickly just from your competitors on different pack sizes. Do they make sense? Category specific attributes, cross promotions, and then also seasonality. So when is your product selling best? And Tmall have all of these sales numbers. That's another thing as well. So you can go and see from start of opening how much your competitors have sold, on which SKUs. It can help you to understand your heroes, to pull out your point of differentiation. Are you going to follow them in terms of their USPs, or are you going to try and change that slightly? And the other thing to take into account is the Chinese online market's quite different to, say, Amazon. There's a lot of impulse purchase, and really USPs have to be refined. You can't say, for example, my product is high quality, my product is from the UK, it has a long history. It is not enough to drive impulse purchase. Things that drive impulse purchase are pure benefits that you're going to provide that consumer, whether that be that it's high in calcium, whether it be that you know, it's something that is perfect for a certain situation, or whether it's something that, you know, it's a recipe that they've had in their mind and you put it there as a banner ad or as a piece of information through social media that they can click on. You really have to look at, okay, how can I best look to sell this, because you only have that one landing page in order to do so. This is, as I mentioned before, just different things you can do. So what platforms is my brand currently selling on, or my competitors? What products are selling well, and what is their pricing? And social listening as well. So if you look at categories, you can very easily go through and look at different brands and how are people reacting to them. So in terms of, is it the branding that they have? Is it certain ingredients? We found some brands that have done well in food and beverage purely because they had a particular ingredient that Chinese consumers had a preference towards. And trying to understand as well, how have your competitors converted from social media to e-commerce? And so why is branding important? I think the main thing here is when a shopper is offline, it's quite simple. It's quite straightforward. They go down a particular aisle that has a certain category. They see very simple product display, potentially some sampling, potentially some video. I know Hermart do that, but not all of the accounts will allow you to do that. The packaging, the brand awareness, look and feel, that's really it. And you can do a lot in terms of working with sales reps by regions to really kind of drive promotions and push your product. But online, really, there's a number of things. You've got price, you've got your sales, which is a big problem. So just very quickly on sales, given that Tmall have the monthly sales, it's a chicken and egg scenario. If you do a lot of marketing with KOLs, out of apps, so on WeChat, on Weibo, on Douyin, and drive them towards a Tmall store, a JD store that has zero sales, no matter how good your brand proposition is, people are going to think, well, if no one's buying it, it's probably not that great. So really what we look to do with brands is first help them to use in-app marketing to increase their sales to a decent amount, and really push it as a new product launch that's just arrived. It's very novel, and you know, and put in a discounting period for the first, say, 3 months, where we can look to do different bundling and different types of giveaways. I think that's the most important part. So sales is something that consumers look at, and finally they look at your landing page. So branding is so important, more important than ever when you're looking at the online channels, and making sure you get that right can be either or make or break it for the brand. So some other things are, for example, if you do it by yourself, if you do not do it by yourself, it's going to get done for you. You'll be given a Chinese name either by Chinese consumers or by your distributor, and then it's very hard to get rid of it. Get your USP right at the beginning, and just touching on the name, you know, there's no need to put the Chinese name on the packaging. That's something that brands have done in the past, and we found it to actually be quite detrimental. But it can definitely be in your media. It can be on your landing page. It's something that you should have kind of a Chinese nickname to support your brand, that it maybe is easier to pronounce, or it's something that people can remember it by. And you know, there's the challenges. You're new to the market. Your brand will most likely sound strange to Chinese consumers. The number of competitor brands in your category makes it tough to remember small to medium-sized players. Again, a lot of what we do when we help brands first come to market is the major e-commerce platforms, and they will very much say, okay, this category is doing really well. It's selling well. if we have to, like, for example, infant milk formula. So there's a clear opportunity for brands in this area, but that also means that there's quite high competition. So what you have to understand is start to look at, okay, well, if this is the amount that's being sold on these platforms, how many brands are selling this? If it's 3 or 4, then there's opportunity for more entrants. Look at the tail of sales, and that really will give some guidance. For new categories, they can be opportunities or they can be nightmares, because you have to really define that category. So, I mean, if we look at things such as Weetabix, right, when they first were in China, so they come under Weet-Bix, which that's a long story, but under a different brand, and essentially with that they were, you know, it's a breakfast brand, but for Chinese consumers it was snacking. It was actually mostly dry at lunch, or, you know, in the office and shared around. And that's something as well where they kind of had a new category that they were pushing into, and whether they're lucky or not, your category has to be defined. There has to be education. You have to spend time on it, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and it can be quite expensive and difficult. So the other thing is touch points. So what I usually say to brands is try and be on as many platforms as possible. And as mentioned before, this does not mean posting content on all of them. It just means having a presence, because it's very different in the China market. It's unique, right? It has so many different social media platforms. It has so many different e-commerce platforms, and they're all unique. Some users, for example, are more preferential towards using JD. Some mothers might be more preferential to using KidsWant as an app. So what you've got to try and understand is that you need to try and list your products on as many as possible. If we look at successful mother and baby brands, we're seeing them on 50 to 60 platforms, which is incredible. And for some brands, that can be quite a stretch. So look at what budget you have and try to aim to do some simple things on each one for your first year, for your second year, and then to expand that, because that's where you'll get the most in terms of touch points. And the most important thing, as I mentioned before, in doing that is paid media. If, for example, you just set up own media on WeChat and Weibo, yes, you will build a community, but it will be slow. So if we look at types of paid media in China, there's a number of different ones. You've got key opinion leaders, you have product seeding, and then you have e-commerce paid media, or essentially, or social media or e-commerce paid media, which are promotional tools that are built into the platform. So all of them have different strengths. Key opinion leaders can be better suited towards fashion and cosmetics. They're also better for conversion. Product seeding is quite expensive, and it leaves a footprint for your brand. And in-channel e-commerce paid media is by far the best in terms of conversion. Social media promotional tools such as Weibo, they have Fengzetong, is the cheapest in terms of brand awareness, but it's not going to bring sales. It's more allowing people to understand to see your brand. Weibo is not good for conversion. That's what we often tell. What we tell our clients. We've seen over the years, actually, it's quite concerning the amount of the conversion we'll have with certain Weibo KOLs compared to before. It is dropping. Even though the views are staying the same, we're getting less and less sales. So there's definitely something fishy in terms of the numbers that Weibo are producing. The promotional tool, however, does seem to be strong in terms of what it can provide. So, for example, for around 5 RMB, you can essentially have 1,000 views. So that's 60 pence, 1,000 views. If you were to bring that up and you're trying to look at, for example, targeting specific cities for offline, it can be quite effective. And the most important thing is trying to understand ROI marketing. So one thing I would always say to brands is, where is your budget going? It has to be focused more on ROI marketing. So the days of vanity marketing where, I had 200,000 views and TV ads and things like that, they're gone. You've really got to work with the agency or to work with the platforms to look at, okay, this is my investment. How much click-through am I going to get on my product? Now, agencies and platforms might not give you sales. That's quite common. It's very difficult for them because of price points. For a number of reasons, they can't say, I think I'm going to sell this much of your product. And certain brands react differently, but they can give you click-through rates. So ask for that. And you can, from that platform, trying to determine what would be, from the click-through rate, what percentage would then be a conversion, and you can try to place your brand to see if it's performing well. Because if it's not performing as well as it should be, there's something that you need to change in terms of how you're presenting it on your landing page. So when we look at the different types of paid media, again, they're different. So, and they have different strengths. WeChat is very good for conversion with KOLs. Again, it's more focused for JD. It doesn't link very well with Tmall and Taobao, although I read a report yesterday that still showed that even through putting down the URL within WeChat, the highest volume of out-of-app media going to Taobao, which again, they're not linked, is from WeChat. So WeChat's very powerful in terms of readership. In terms of its advertising capabilities on moment ads, it's very expensive. It's not very accurate, and I wouldn't recommend it for brands. It's very much more on the vanity marketing scale. If you have a mini program, one thing that's quite good you can do with WeChat is the mini program ads. So they're quite cool. Basically, that allows you to have a click per a CPC model, right? So a cost per click. So you can essentially be charged each time someone clicks on your mini program, which would be your shop. And these banners are good because once someone clicks onto a mini program, they automatically become a follower. So they're very inexpensive ways of building the amount of followers towards a mini program, which would be your shop. Weibo, as mentioned before, the promotional tools are quite good. I wouldn't recommend working with Weibo KOLs. We've found there just isn't the conversion from them. They're better for offline, but for online, it's a waste of money. With Little Red Book, again, it's more about seeding, so it's looking at how many notes can you generate over a period of time. It's quite inexpensive. Basically, you just send out products to KOCs. You might have to pay a small fee of around £10, depending on the level of KOC, and essentially they'll create more authentic content around your brand. Douyin, so Douyin, as I mentioned, is probably the best in terms of KOLs. WeChat and Douyin, depending on where your store is, if it's Tmall, for example, then Douyin's very good. It links directly to Tmall. And they have very good ways of also targeting specific users, depending on the amount of budget that you bring to the platform. So that's one thing that we would recommend. And then you have your in-app marketing. So in-app marketing is so important. Usually in-app marketing to ROI can range. It can be very much usually, so say for example, for every £10 you want to get in gross merchandise value, it can be between £1 and £4 of investment. So it gives a good idea. Certain categories change. You can look at the Ali index, you can work with agencies and they can give you a good idea of what the ROI should be. But essentially they're a safer bet in terms of trying to drive sales, and really should be the first part of your investment. Second part being more paid media, and then finally the third part being your own media. So product seeding is pretty straightforward. It's about working with seeding agencies. All marketing agencies now usually offer the service, and basically it allows you to send out products. They also multi-platform, not just Little Red Book, also on Douyin, WeChat, and Weibo to KOC. So KOC marketing has become more and more popular. Mostly it's been driven by, I think, the authenticity behind it, where consumers are kind of seeing through certain KOLs and they realize that this isn't quite authentic anymore. So they're looking for more word of mouth strategies. So key opinion leaders, this is, I mean, I think it's probably the most debated subject in China. I know KOL influencers haven't necessarily always been as successful in the West. It continues to be really strong in China, but through different channels, right? So we have KOLs that are doing live streaming. They're completely dominating in terms of conversion recently. We have KOLs that have their own blogs, that are doing video-focused content. I think, you know, the most important thing with a KOL is just to make sure, are they going to be focused on conversion, and are they going to work with you towards your KPIs? When we work with KOLs, we always first look at would they do commission basis. If they say no outright, that's a little bit of a concern. If they do a little bit of a 50-50, so they'll do some commission and some down payment, that shows that they are confident they can convert. The platform that they're on is important. Are they on WeChat or Douyin, being the best for conversion? Are they multi-platform in terms of their capabilities, and can they add on the other platforms for free if needed? And also their follower base, does it match? That's really the most important. The final thing as well is once that they sign agencies, we find the agencies often will buy a lot of followers for KOLs to bring up their pricing. So also trying to find KOLs that are in around the 10,000 RMB range is usually the best. So if we've got micro, mid, and top level, this kind of gives you an idea of the amount of followers that they would have. And our recommendation really, it depends by platform, but you're wanting to be on Little Red Book again, stick with KOCs, don't really need to work with KOLs. On Douyin, they're usually around 10 to 20,000 RMB, so about one to 3,000 pounds, depending. They're usually the best kind of range in terms of for conversion and getting a good ROI. Any higher, it's quite difficult to get the ROI you want. Any lower, it's the same again. That's usually the range we look at. And WeChat's very similar. Usually about 10 to 20,000 RMB is probably the best in terms of conversion. Weibo is much cheaper. So that's one thing I know a lot of brands are tempted by. A Weibo KOL that's quite good might have, 500,000 views, followers, might be 3,000 RMB to work with, right? So the problem is though that it just won't get the conversion, and it's not recommended. You're better working with stronger KOLs on the other platforms than with Weibo. And really this table kind of sums that up, right? So this is how different platforms have different focus in terms of, are they awareness focused or are they conversion? So if we look at, for example, the WeChat, we find that it's very much focused on conversion when you're using kind of KOL push-outs. Same with Douyin as well, with KOL push-outs. They have certain promotional tools that you can invest on, not the moment advertising, but on other ones that can be very much around conversion. And then CPS partnerships. So CPS partnerships are essentially partnerships that you can go into with live streamers or with certain KOLs where it's a cost per sale, basically a commission basis. And these are the best, right? So live streamers will do it. The best though can have sometimes 50, 60% commission. So it's really trying to find the right time, approach them, really bring through the branding of your product and see how they react. But they're the best for conversion as well. Live streaming we have seen, I thought it was a bit of a gimmick when it started and it wouldn't last long, but it has just continued to excel and to do really, really, really well. So, and then we look at e-commerce, there's three major stores. So you have the flagship store, the specialty store, and the franchise store. So when we're looking at some brands also have, some overriding brands, umbrella companies have multiple brands. Specialty stores can be quite good because you can range them different products. With flagship stores, that's really for one brand only, and they can be, by having a flagship store, you get a number of things. You get a lot of data, and you also get a lot of, you have a lot of ability to use the in-channel marketing that you wouldn't have if you were working with a retailer where you put your product in their store. So when trying to set up a flagship store, it's often the need to find a team or partner comes around. I think what's really important again is a lot of the TPs when they first started, they again were trading companies. So making sure that the TP has a creative capability is very important. A good understanding of in-app marketing, an ability to provide you with a cost to GMV ratio. So for example, if you're going to invest 500,000 in the first year, how much are they going to get you in sales? Then three things are really the recipe to success. If you have good-looking banner ads, if you have a good-looking landing page, good-looking product display, you have a good understanding of in-app marketing, then you really can do well on the flagship stores. And again, just going back to the costs, if we look at, for example, the deposit, which is something you get back, it is more on Tmall. The tech fee can be more as well, but then the commissions can be less. So if we look at the costs, they're more or less the same. The biggest cost you're going to have is going to be an agency fee, which can range from a couple of £1,000 a month to £5,000 a month, depending on the size of the TP and the kind of their background. And then you're going to have the commissions that are in place. But the biggest cost by far is going to be the in-app marketing. How much are you going to invest on the banners to drive up your sales? Because if not, there's kind of a break-even point, right, based on sales and the amount of cost that you put in there. So if you don't invest enough on the in-app marketing, it won't generate enough sales to make the store worthwhile. And usually, rule of thumb for the first year is we say, aim to break even. Second year is really about driving through profit and making some money. WeChat mini programs, again, they're brilliant to open, but don't expect huge things from them. Private traffic is expensive. It takes a lot of time to build it up, but they're cool in terms of the fact that you can be very personalized. You can do loyalty programs, you can create CRM, you can do direct engagement with your end consumer, you can talk to your end consumer. They're very helpful in terms of, for certain products, what you can do to localize, to do cross-branding, to track, to have that customer base that's ready and available as well if you launch new products. But again, it's very much a slow burn. And repeat purchase, I think that's something that is really important, because if consumers try your product the first time as well, especially if you're looking at Tmall and in-app investment that you're putting there, you need to be ensuring they're buying again. And usually if we see that consumers buy a second, third, fourth, fifth time, they start to create a habit. So how do we build that habit? There's a number of things. So for example, one thing we'll do is if a brand has a number of different types of SKUs, we'll often bundle them SKUs. And once we've bundled them together, we'll use a different ones. So we can basically, it might not be, I mean, even myself, I've tried brands before where I've tried one cider that they had, for example, and not liked it. Then later I tried another and it's become one of my favorite brands. So it allows for consumers to try a number of different ones. And then also on your Tmall store, you need, or your WeChat store, you need to have opportunities to buy one SKU only. So once people have discovered they like this particular SKU, they can then buy it in bulk, and that will, and also for a discount. Merchandising, so for certain brands, trying to do giveaways. So for example, for every other time you buy a product, send something special. I know like Lululemon, they send things in like specific boxes. So Lululemon is a fashion brand that's done very well here. They have specific boxes with certain notes. When they send things out, the notes can be different each time. Mother and baby brands, they send out, for example, soft toys with every other purchase. So it's something that connects, and maybe the mother and baby brand or the food brand has a story made up of different characters, and each time a character can be given out as a free gift until they collect them all. So it's trying to build that ongoing behavior. Limited editions as well. So looking at certain products that would only come out for Chinese New Year, for example, can be very helpful. Looking at VIP and loyalty schemes as well. So trying to get month-on-month conversion. That's the most important. And so in-app marketing, as I mentioned before, these are some case studies. These are really important for the beginning. You know, ensure when the category searched that you come up in terms of being placed quite high, looking at different banner ads, live streaming, diamond booth. These will be where the first stage of your investment should go. If we looked at the first couple of years, really what I would say is the first 4 to 5 months of the launch, you can do some paid media and really push on in-app marketing. And then once you get through your first year, you've seen your sales do well, start to do more and more paid media on the out-of-app channels, on WeChat, on Douyin, and then finally look to go to have your own media set up and run. That's really kind of the way that it has to follow. Because the thing is with own media, a lot of brands will say, well, I'll set it up myself. I can do it. It's quite simple. I can post out content. But for Chinese consumers, if they come across it and it's not really up to their style, WeChat's very different to Facebook, and it very much demands high quality creativeness and high quality content. It's a lot of reading through each article. And if it's not done right, it can be actually damaging towards the brand. People start to think, okay, well, the brand behind the products I'm buying doesn't put that much effort into their marketing here. So sometimes it's better just to step back and leave that till phase 3. And no matter the size of the brand, it's always important, I think, to choose as many outlets as possible. Again, it's not about creating own media on each one. It's about how can you work with these strategically. Doing seeding on Little Red Book, working with KOLs of conversion on Douyin, with Weibo using their promotional tools through your own media, through WeChat setting up your own media and doing simple messaging and push outs, using different KOLs and driving them to a private store, and then looking at how many different other platforms you can set up. My suggestion would be, because of brand budgets, start off with Tmall, either Tmall Global or Tmall Domestic, depending on your situation, if you have a distributor or an entity, or if you're doing cross-border. And start to grow your sales. Put in a certain amount of investment the first year, and really say, okay, this is what I'm expecting to get out of it. Work with your TB to get to that point, and then really work through year 2, year 3, and what is the expectation from that. And then finally, with the recent response. So if we look at things that have changed, as I mentioned before, I think that it's pretty much not much has changed in terms of the advice that we would give. But brands need to develop a more niche approach to what they're doing. They need to work with flexible partners that can help them on multiple platforms with certain functions, and to look at more tailored strategies on niche for niche target audiences as well. So not going out to mass market and trying to sell a product that not everyone is going to buy. Try and find that niche, create WeChat groups, create communities instead of just having one-way WeChat push-outs. I think that's really the key to it. Post year one, brands will then have got a better understanding of what works for them and what does not, and they can change their approach. We've had certain brands that just didn't sell as well on Douyin as they did on WeChat. A number of reasons why. Douyin traditionally was for younger consumers, generally was more discounted, whereas with WeChat, it has a much larger demographic range. And so we saw that with more premium products, they were selling well, really well with WeChat KOLs. So we started with that particular brand to change the strategy. With ice cream, we found that it's more energetic and young and fun. So with them, we found that Douyin worked better. And year two have put more investment in towards Douyin for conversion to their store. The other thing is to have basically a better discussion. This then, helps with a better discussion when looking to then work with, for example, Tmall Global or Alibaba later on as well. If you've gone through all of these different points, you've started to generate sales. If you're looking to approach Alibaba as a first point, Tmall Global has very much relaxed their entrance policies. So just go to them with a good marketing plan, with a good TP, with a good plan of investment, and they're very receptive. And brands should also be looking to set up on as many touch points as possible without damaging the amount of budget that you have. You can't spread yourself too thin, especially with the major platforms. With social media platforms, I would say 5 to 6. But again, they have different functions. You only do certain things. So that's pretty much everything for today, I think. So there's our QR code here. You can scan through for more information. We put out some weekly posts on different platforms and changes and updates in the China market. So brilliant. I think we'll move on now to the questions, if I can figure out how to do this.
Oh yeah, it's okay. You can leave your screen, or I'll put mine back up as well. Whichever. Okay. Thank you so much, Ryan. Wow, that was a really great presentation. I can't believe how much you covered in 50 minutes. We do have some questions, and first and foremost, quite a few people have been asking if we can share the slides afterwards. I'm assuming that's okay.
Yep, that's completely fine. Yeah, share them.
So after this, I will send out a follow-up email with all of Ryan's contact details, and I think if you email Ryan, he can send the slides to you afterwards. So our first question is from Jack. Hi Ryan, thank you very much for your presentation. You really prioritize maximum touch points. Is it therefore better to do things as small things across all platforms rather than having one platform on which you're very strong?
Yeah, I think the way to look at that, it's a really good question. So the way to look at that is sales outlets. So I would make one sales outlet, say potentially Tmall, kind of your HQ, where when you're using different platforms such as Douyin or WeChat or Little Red Book, you're really trying to divert traffic to that one particular platform. Now, what I would, and it really depends on budget, right? So what I would then suggest is for other platforms to try and look at hypermarket models where you can sell the product to them, where you could work with retailers that are on JD or on Kaola, where you still have a touch point, but you don't necessarily need a huge amount of budget in order to sell, and don't really look at them as being your main sales channels. One thing that a lot of consumers will also do is they'll see a product on Kaola or on Little Red Book, and they know they can buy it cheaper on Tmall, so they'll move over to Tmall to purchase that product. So the best thing is, in terms of in-app, you really want to focus on one e-commerce platform, but for out-of-app, for your social media, I would do different things. It would be, for example, seeding on Little Red Book, KOLs on Douyin. For your own media, only work with, for example, WeChat, for example. So I think it's really about getting it right on each one and just making sure they're fulfilling their function.
Okay, great. I don't see any more questions at the moment, but we've also hit 10:30, so that actually brings us to the end of the webinar. But no, that was a really, oh no, we have another question. Lucky for us. You highlighted that Daigo are an important route to market for SMEs. How do you manage pricing across so many diverse and small channels?
That's a good question, and it depends on the Daigo that you're working with. So if you're talking about distribution Daigo, where they buy up your product, that's really an agreement that you have to put in place with them. So they would look to buy that product over 2 to 3 years. You have to be careful with them undercutting your costs. That can be an issue. But again, how long is your distribution agreement with them? That's the main thing. If you're quite a famous brand that has multiple stores across the UK, again, you might have issues with them selling through Taobao. Now, one thing you can do is you can work with the platforms to set a pricing level. So that would mean that once the distribution agreement has finished with that particular Daigo, if people are still going to the stores and buying your product and selling them on Taobao, they can continue to do so. And I mean, some brands say, no, I don't want. I want to close that channel off completely. I think it's actually great. It's an opportunity to increase the volume of your sales and of your brand, and it's free branding. But it's the price that's the issue. So work with agencies. So we do help brands with this as well. Or you can work with the platform directly, and they can set price caps, which means that certain resellers cannot sell under that amount.
Great. Yeah, I think people sometimes get quite concerned about Daigos when they first find out about them, but no, absolutely agree with that. And more questions as well from Annie. What would you suggest as the landing page for paid ads, e-commerce platforms, or social media? Does that make
Sorry?
sense? What would you suggest as the best landing page for paid ads, e-commerce platforms, or social media?
That's interesting. It really depends on the category. I would look at it. It depends on what you're trying to do, right? So, for example, if you're looking at a emotional festival, then I would look at using landing pages like H5s that you can design in social media. You can tell more of a brand story. If it's a brand launch, that can be great as well. If you're looking at awareness, I think that can be the best option. If you're looking at, for example, you're doing a quite intense discount period on 11/11 or 618, I would focus on landing pages, on banner ads in e-commerce. In terms of, if we look at the landing page that I was discussing before under the product listing, the most important is definitely e-commerce. Because if you tell the story from social media, you've got to think that the final destination is still going to be e-commerce. So someone, for example, sees the landing page on social media, they think, wow, this product's great. They click through, and then they try to get more understanding of where the product's from, the accreditation it might have, the ingredients, and it's just poorly done, then it's just you're going to have a lot of click through and no conversion. So I would say they're both important, but ultimately e-commerce landing pages from a branding perspective would be most important. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, there was an extension onto that question, and it was for brands with a very small budget. So would that be the same?
For brands with a small budget, I would suggest that you look to work with one of the major cross-border or domestic platforms. You put all your budget that you can into in-channel marketing and live streaming, discounting your product relatively heavy from a high premium with the live streamers to try and build up your sales in the first 6 to 8 months. And then following that, I would look at paid media. So look at different KOLs that can help bring through the brand story. But yes, so for smaller brands, I would focus on getting a Tmall store up and running, and then later you can branch out to other retailers on other platforms and see their interest of listing your product.
All right, great. And a thank you from Annie for that answer. So thank you so much again, Ryan, and thank you everybody for joining us today. I know people have places to be, so we will wrap up there. As I said, I will send a follow-up email to this with all of Ryan's details and Redfern's contact details as well. So if you have any more questions, you can get in contact with Ryan for those, and as well to distribute the slides. If you can drop Ryan an email, I think he'll be happy to share those slides with you. And yeah, I hope everyone enjoyed, and I hope that you're all not going too crazy at home and that you have a really great rest of the week. And yeah, tune in next time. Actually, tomorrow morning, please do tune in at 9:30 again. We have another webinar tomorrow, so we've got 2 speakers, so please do come and listen. And yeah, thank you, Ryan. Cheers.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.